Hello, and welcome to a brand new day of free-to-play here on Magic the Gathering Arena. Get the dish on the latest with me, Lord Rumfish. My limited set review cannot be complete until I go over the uncommons on the bonus sheet. These are the Multiverse Legends. People who've been brought from all across the planes into the conflict against Phyrexia. So there's all kinds of funky legends with all kinds of weird abilities, especially at Rare and Mythic. But for the purpose of limited and this limited guide, I'm going to focus in on the uncommons. I don't believe there's any commons on the bonus sheet. But the uncommons are going to come up often enough that they will affect your draft and your archetypes. So with that being said, let's get in here. All right, Daxos, Blessed by the Sun. 2 white. Uncommon. 2 asterisk. Legendary enchantment creature, demigod. His toughness is equal to your devotion to white. And that is the number of white mana symbols and the mana costs of permanents that you control. Yeah, there's weird keyword abilities and stuff coming in on this bonus sheet. This is going to be complicated, sorry. Whenever another creature you control enters the battlefield or dies, you gain 1 life. And life gain, there aren't a lot of payoffs inside the normal set, but there are some payoffs that exist in the bonus sheet. So Daxos can be a life gain enabler if you get some other things from the bonus sheet. I think we might see those further down. So overall, he's okay. If you've got 2 white mana, he's at least a 2/2 for 2. He's going to gain you life over the course of the game. If your deck is, fairly white, has a decent amount of white in it, his toughness is going to bump up and he's going to become a great blocker for you. He's all right. Double white pips is actually kind of hard to hit on turn 2. But if he comes down later, you'll probably have more devotion to white. He'll have pretty high toughness when he does come down, so I think Daxos is okay. Alright, Quinde, Pride of Famarif. There's 3 colorless and a white. 2/2, legendary creature, human knight, uncommon, double strike. Creatures you control with first strike have double strike. This is interesting because there are actually a couple of creatures with first strike in the set. And this is just a double striker straight up. So I commented when I looked over red and white that there was more defensive first strike and double strike than I was used to seeing. And Quinde plays right into that. Gives you yet more creatures dealing damage on the first strike damage step. And this can create a wall of first strike, where if you block with enough creatures with double strike and first strike, unless the opponent makes the creature indestructible, or gives it an incredible pump to its toughness, then you can just kind of first strike something dead on blocks. Used to be a lot more of a thing in older formats. Hasn't been a thing so much in more recent formats, but watch out. It's got a little bit of a return here. More so than most recent sets we've seen, I think. Inga Rune Eyes. Blue and 3 colorless. Uncommon. 3/3, legendary creature, human wizard. When she ETBs, scry 3. That is a big scry. When she dies, you draw 3 cards if 3 or more creatures died this turn. And that would count her, right? It doesn't say other creatures. So if she is the 3rd thing to die, 2 other creatures die, then Inga dies, then you draw 3 cards. That's hard to pull off. It is doable with an Aristocrats deck. Black has an enormous amount of sacrifice outlets in this set. And as long as Inga goes into a deck that's got fodder to sacrifice, you're not in a big hurry to sacrifice a 3/3 for 4. That's a pretty relevant body on the battlefield. But as long as you're getting value in the process, and in this case, drawing 3 cards is a heck of a lot of value, then you wouldn't mind doing it. I think for most decks, she's going to be more of a giant octopus, Hill Giant, just kind of a 3/3 for 4, gives you a scry 3. So you're very likely to hit a land or a non-land. You can kind of line up your deck a little bit. That's not terrible. But there is an outside chance you could set up an Aristocrats pile that could actually use Inga Runai's Death Trigger, which would be interesting. Tetsuko Umezawa, Fugitive. Blue and a colorless. Uncommon 1/3 legendary creature human rogue. Creatures you control with power or toughness 1 or less can't be blocked. So this gives itself unblockability as long as you don't pump its power. It also makes your other creatures with low power or toughness unblockable. Interesting card. 1/3 is a decent blocker. And an unblockable creature is useful for various reasons. It's a slow clock, but it is a clock. It could also help you sneak in to attack battles. And a battle doesn't have nearly as long of a clock as the opponent does. So that's interesting too. Yeah, overall, I think this card is fine. I think it would be difficult to build a whole deck around it. But if you pick it up, then it's something you can be paying attention to as you take cards. That maybe you could have more unblockable things. Yeah, it's not the worst. It's alright. Timuret, Chosen from Death. 2 black mana. Legendary enchantment creature, demigod, uncommon. 2 asterisk. Timuret's toughness is equal to your devotion to black. So, the white card we were just looking at, well, this is another high toughness based on devotion to black. So black mana symbols and the costs of permanents you control. He's at least a 2/2 when he comes down because of his own mana cost. You can pay a black and a colorless any number of times, and exile up to 2 target cards from graveyards. You gain 1 life for each creature card exiled this way. Timuret is neat. If you're in the blue-black mill deck, he's not bad in the deck because you can be eating things out of your graveyard to gain life, and if you get your opponent well past 8 cards in their graveyard, he can eat stuff from their graveyard too to gain you life. Kind of shuts down things that return things back from the graveyard. There's not a whole lot of those in this set, but there are some. He's just kind of a playable, big blocking creature that can gain you some life and can kind of shut down graveyard shenanigans. He also works defensively very well against the blue-black deck. Just keep your graveyard under 8 cards, you are good to go. He's got uses. He's got things to do in the format. Plays pretty well with the symmetrical mill. I think Timuret's decent. I don't think he's amazing, but I think he's decent. Yargle, Glutton of Urborg. Black and 4 colorless. Uncommon. 9/3. Legendary creature, Frog Spirit. It's a vanilla legend. Has no text. other than flavor text. It's a 9/3 for 5. Um, the low toughness is a little bit of a problem. Um, Probably some of the best ways to put Yargle to use. You could, there's a piece of red equipment that gives a creature menace and +1 power. So, yeah, the opponent would still probably happily block with 2 things, but Yargle is very likely to kill both of them if you give him menace. So that's card advantage, which is fine. You could also, there's a piece of equipment in colorless that gives flying. So then you could have a 10/3 flying Yargle. That sounds pretty good too. Yeah, just as long as you've got some way to kind of sneak him in, give him some keywords, make him relevant to combat, then he's pretty good. And this also, Yargle would play well with backup creatures. I think white-red. White-red's kind of like it's got the signpost uncommon. But Yargle is splashable, and you could have a 3-color deck, like Mardu. It would be fun to get down Yargle and then put a backup counter and give him, I don't know, double strike, trample, first strike. Um, some ridiculous ability. He's not great, but his power for his mana cost is obviously way above rate. So if you can find some way, then he's cool. Otherwise, he's just, good blocker, whatever. Valduk, Keeper of the Flame, red and 2 colorless. Uncommon, 3/2, legendary creature, human shaman. At the beginning of combat on your turn, for each aura and equipment attached to this guy, create a 3/1 red elemental creature token with trample and haste. Exile those tokens at the beginning of the next end step. So, Valduk really gives you a reason to start grabbing up equipment, which is interesting because even though there's not a lot of equipment in the set, the equipment that I've seen is not bad, is pretty good, pretty useful. +1/+1 in vigilance, +1/+0 in menace, and if you hit, you get a treasure. +2/+0, +1/+0 in flying. I think I'm pretty down for all of that. And then you don't even have to swing in with him, because if you've got like 3 pieces of equipment attached to Valduk, he's going to make 9 power of elementals with haste and trample every turn. So this is part of the fun of the bonus sheet here is like there are these hidden archetypes that aren't on the normal radar of the set. Kamigawa Neon Dynasty was a deep, deep draft set because of all of the amount of interaction that existed between all the cards of the set. It had a lot of deep play, and archetypes could emerge that weren't part of the beaten path. If you find Valduk, you've, got nothing better to take, you've already taken some equipment or something, I think this would be a pretty neat win condition in Limited. And 3/2 for 3 is not exciting, but is okay. It is playable. Blocks decently well. So, Valduk's alright. Zada Hedron Grinder. Red and 3 colorless, uncommon, 3/3, legendary creature, goblin ally. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell that targets only this guy, copy that spell for each other creature you control the spell could target. Each copy targets a different one of those creatures. So, I don't love combat tricks most of the time in Limited, but this turns it into like an overrun. This makes all of your combat tricks into ridiculous blowout plays. You always have to start by targeting Zada, but if you have mana open, you can do it at instant speed. Then, even if the opponent tries to kill Zada, you might still be able to do the thing. Here's a card I think would be interesting with Zada, just one off the top of my head. There's a green spell for 4 mana, and it finds a land for you out of your library tapped. It's an instant. It also puts 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature you control. Now, I want you to imagine that you have a Zada. The opponent is amused, has not tried to kill it yet, or doesn't have a kill spell yet. You untap, and then at instant speed, at some point, you cast this spell, and it copies for every other creature that you control. Let's say you've got like 3 other creatures in play other than Zada. That seems like a reasonable number, right? They could be tokens, whatever. So you would fetch 4 lands out of your library onto the battlefield tapped, and put 2 +1/+1 counters on every creature you control. Things like that are possible with this card. So I don't think you should underestimate what it can do. Right? Again, this is like a hidden archetype, one that people don't even know exists in the format, are not looking for it, aren't really paying attention to the instants and sorceries targeting things like this. I don't know how good of a deck you could build with it, but there is some crazy, crazy potential even in Limited with Zada. Finn the Fangbearer. You might already know what this does. Green and a colorless. That's an uncommon. It's a 1/3 legendary creature, human warrior. Death touch. And that's already good enough right there. Right? 1/3 death toucher for 2. You've already got a pretty playable creature. And then whenever a creature you control with Death Touch deals combat damage to a player, that player gets 2 poison counters. Now, I don't know if there's really enough Death Touch creatures in this set to poison the opponent out. But fortunately, Finn is pretty playable without that. I know that there are some Death Touch creatures. One of them even has backup, so it could temporarily give another one of your things Death Touch. You probably won't be able to build a whole deck around Finn, but Finn is very playable. It's a good 2-drop, so you'll be pretty happy to pick him up. Renata, Called to the Hunt. 2 green, 2 colorless, uncommon, star 3. Legendary enchantment creature, Demigod. Renata's power is equal to your devotion to green. So, she would at least be a 2/3 from herself, and her power can just, rocket on upwards the more green permanents you have with mana symbols. And each other creature you control enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. This just goes right into green-white. Green-white +1/+1 counter archetype, Renata just slots right in there. But I would say that she's also good enough to see play in other green decks. Having all of your future creatures come in with a +1 counter seems good enough to me, especially in Limited. Yeah, I think Renata's a very strong card for green. Agar, the Freezing Flame. Blue, red, and a colorless, uncommon, 3/3. Legendary creature, Giant Wizard. So whenever a creature or planeswalker an opponent controls is dealt excess damage, so more than was necessary to kill it, if a giant wizard or spell you controlled dealt damage to it this turn, draw a card. Okay, so I think there are a handful of wizards that are scattered in the set. I remember there's a giant. The Mountain Cycler, right? You can pay 2 and discard him. The 5/5 with haste for 6. That guy's a giant. It's a Phyrexian giant, I believe. But more importantly, there are a bunch of red spells that deal damage. So I think it's not crazy that you could put Agar into your blue-red deck. And you could be convoking or whatever, and that's fine. And a bunch of the red spells you want to be playing anyway deal damage. There's even a big convoke one that deals 6 damage. And that's definitely going to draw you a card using Agar. So yeah, a 3/3 for 3 is a playable stat line. It's, a pretty decent creature. And then you can be drawing cards as you play your red removal spells. You might even have some other giants or wizards in your deck. So, yeah, I think Agar's not bad here at all. Dina, Soul Steeper. We were just at Strixhaven not that long ago. Black and a green. Uncommon, 1/3. Legendary creature, Dryad Druid. Whenever you gain life, each opponent loses 1 life. Okay, so Dina is a payoff card for life gain. Now it'd be weird to play her in the same deck with a spell that costs white, like Daxos. But you could. Dina also would trigger off of all of the dual lands at common. Every one of those that you play, she's gonna, take a point off the opponent's life total. There's some green cards that have ETB triggers of life gain as well. So it's strange. It's strange to build around life gain in this format, but if you pick up Dina, and she's a 1/3 for 2 who has, a neat ability in an Aristocrats deck, and I've already commented that I think that black and green can do an Aristocrats build. The Signpost uncommon is black-red, but I feel like green has the tools that are necessary. Dina's another tool here for an Aristocrats build with black. So you can pay 1, sacrifice another creature, and she gets +X+O until end of turn, where X is the sacrifice creature's power. And there's some neat stuff that I think Dina could do in a black-green deck. Right, so completed Huntmaster sacks things to turn them into 3/3 incubators. And Dina could take your 3/3 incubators and come in with 4 power or 7 power. Basically, the thing that's neat about Dina is like the threat of activation. Is if the opponent lets her through, then you can do a lot of damage from out of nowhere. Hey, come to think of it, Dina actually works with that weird blue rare, where a creature with 1 power or 1 toughness is unblockable. That would make Dina unblockable. Then you just sack your board and win the game. So, yeah, I think Dina's actually better than she looks here. I think there's very much a black-green Aristocrats build. I think Dina's part of it. The life gain thing's a little bit more oddball, but still, once you know that Dina's in your deck, you can be thinking about the life gain aspect, and you can be thinking about maybe taking a few cards that gain life if you, would otherwise maybe want them anyway. Oh yeah, actually one of the cards that gains life is one of the double face cards. It's a green 2-drop. It's a 1/3, gains 3 life when it ETBs. Then when you flip it, it's like a kill spell. Reduces an opponent creature's toughness equal to its power. Yeah. So that thing actually synergizes decently well with Dina. Just, ETB, gain some life, get another 1/3 blocker. Yeah, I kind of like what Dina's putting down here. I think it could definitely work. Verja. Furia? Uh, Not sure how to pronounce it. Judge of Valor. So white, black, black, and 2 colorless. Uncommon, 2/4, legendary creature, angel cleric. Flying and lifelink. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, look at the top 3 cards of your library, put 1 into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. Seems good. If you can cast this, and it does have, a pretty strict mana requirement here, but if you can cast it, she, yeah, Furia's a her. If you can cast her, then you get a 2/4 flying lifelinker, which is one heck of a blocker. Not the worst attacker, especially if you can get her through, pump her power, something like that. And anytime you manage to double spell, which isn't the easiest, but if you do, then you get, like, what is it? Anticipate? And the other cards go into your graveyard. So you get the best card out of your top 3, you put a couple into your graveyard. Even better if you have some graveyard synergy going on. Some way to utilize and make use of your graveyard. But even if you don't double spell, a 2/4 flying lifelinker is a pretty nice presence on the battlefield. Just overall, I think she's very playable. Emoti, Celebrant of Bounty. A green, a blue, and 3 colorless. Uncommon, 3/1. Is that how you read this line? I never liked this card layout. It's so impossible to read. I think it's a 3/1. Legendary creature, Naga Druid. So, Cascade, which means, because Cascade's not a mechanic in this set, when you cast this, you exile cards from the top of your library until you hit a non-land card that costs less. Just any non-land card that costs less than 5. You may cast it without paying its mana cost. Then you put the exiled cards on the bottom in a random order. So Cascade gets you a free spell that's cheaper. And spells you cast with mana value 6 or greater have Cascade. So I think Emoti is already playable. A 3-power blocker trades pretty well defensively in combat. And getting a free spell that costs 4 or less is likely to impact the board in some way. You could get a little unlucky and hit like a combat trick or something that's not very impactful, or just has poor timing. But most of the things that you should be playing in your limited deck are going to do something good for you to be cast for free. Cascade's a very powerful ability. And just that on its own means it's a playable card. If you manage to trigger the mana value 6 or greater Cascades, oh man, just one of those. Just like you get this and a free spell. If you get a 6-drop and a free spell, you are off to the races at that point. Yeah, I think this is actually really good. I think this is really playable. It has a lot of words on it. Has a weird, frame that it's in, but I think this card is good. And if you can cast it, if you're in these colors, you should pick this up. Jury, Master of the Review. Black and a red. Uncommon, 1/1, legendary creature, human shaman. Whenever you sacrifice a permanent, put a +1/+1 counter on Jury. And when he dies, it deals damage equal to its power to any target. So, yeah, I think this is good. If you're in red-black aristocrats, I think this is just good. You're going to be sacrificing things, and if you don't have the time or inclination to grow Jury, which you should, he's going to be a great threat in your deck. But if you were in a bind and you just needed to, you could sack him, and he would be just fine as a sacrifice fodder. Deal damage equal to his power to something, sacrifice him for some kind of value. Normally I would keep him around and build him up, though. Yeah, I think if you're in that deck, then he's great. Seems like there's a lot of payoffs for aristocrats. Radha, Coalition Warlord. Wasn't this card just in Dominaria United? Isn't it already legal in Standard? Red, a green, and 2 colorless, uncommon, 3/3. Legendary creature, Elf Warrior. Domain. Whenever Radha, Coalition Warlord, becomes tapped, another target creature gets +X, or X is the number of basic land types. So, a couple of things here with Radha. She could tap to crew a vehicle. There aren't a lot of those, but there are a couple of those. She can tap to Convoke. And that's a tricky one. She can tap to Convoke, and that is like a combat trick at that point to pump up another one of your creatures. At least by 2, right? Because if you're in red and green, you've probably got a mountain and a forest. The common lands of this set do not have basic land types. Something to be aware of. But yeah, you're probably going to get a 2 or 3 point boost off of Radha. A 3/3 for 4 is okay. Right, Hill Giant stats. And if you just attack with her, then you're going to make another one of your creatures enormous. So they might be able to block and trade, kill Radha, but something else of yours got a big boost that turn. And maybe it had trample, or maybe it had double strike, She is okay. She's certainly playable and sneaky if you have, like, vehicles or Convoke or some other weird way to tap a creature. So just something to be aware of. Anyway, she's playable. She's not amazing, but she's decent. Right, Raph, Weatherlight Stalwart. Another recent legend. White and a blue. Uncommon, 1/3. Legendary creature, Human Wizard. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you may tap 2 untapped creatures you control. If you do, draw a card. And pay white, and 3. Creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain Vigilance until end of turn. So there's kind of a mini overrun effect built in here. That's nice. Vigilance is really cool. It means you're not really risking much of anything other than, combat tricks and stuff to pump up and attack in. If you did get to 10 mana, you could do the pump twice. That's not very likely, but could happen. And you could try to build a spells deck. Or at the very least, if you go wide, and this is in white-blue, so I guess you'd be maybe in a Knights deck or maybe in a funky multicolor deck. But you'll have an instant or sorcery spell here and there. And if you go wide enough, you may be able to tap 2 creatures you control to draw a card. And that's cool. This is a playable legend. The team pump ability is pretty nice. Overall, just decent card. Rayav, Master Smith. Red and a white. Uncommon, 2/2. Legendary creature, Dwarf Artificer. Whenever a creature you control that's enchanted or equipped attacks, that creature gains double strike until end of turn. So, this is another creature that cares about having like equipment or auras on it. The first one we looked at was in red, and he made a whole bunch of tokens for every, chunk of stuff he was wearing. If you had both of these in the same deck, Rayav would give that guy double strike if he attacked. Rayav also opens up the possibility of going wide, where you have like a piece of equipment here, an aura there, another piece of equipment here. You attack with them, like you play down Rayav, attack with those, they all gain double strike. That's pretty good. Probably a little bit hard to use, but definitely a nice ability. Makes you value your equipment more highly. I think he's probably the better card compared to the other one. They're both fun, though. Rona, Sheoldred's Faithful. Blue, 2 black, 1 colorless. She's also legal in Standard. Uncommon, 3/4. Legendary creature, human wizard. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, each opponent loses 1 life. You may cast Rona from your graveyard by discarding 2 cards in addition to paying its other costs. So, blue-black, Rona is a spells payoff card. She's a 3/4 for 4. She's got a decent stat line. And she has a good long game value because if you, get a couple of lands into your hand, right? Don't just play them onto the battlefield. You can discard those lands and get Rona back out of your graveyard. I feel like she doesn't have that much synergy going on with what's happening in the set, but she's just decent. Yeah, she's decent. Go ahead and play her if I'm in the colors. Shauna, Sisei's Legacy. Green, white. Uncommon. 0/0. Legendary creature, human warrior. She can't be the target of abilities your opponents control. Don't we call that hexproof? Is there something different about this ability compared to hexproof? Does this mean that she could be targeted by your allies in a multiplayer game? Does hexproof say like no other player can target her and this would let your allies target her? Anyway, I'm not sure why this isn't hexproof. She gets +1/+1 for each creature you control. And, I mean, that's playable. Any creature that grows and keeps becoming a bigger threat over the course of the game is good. If you can get a 2-drop that later in the game is going to be like, a 5/5, 6/6, something threatening, that's nice. So yeah, I think Shauna is totally playable. Going to be a good card for you. All right, that is going to wrap it up, finally, at long last. I've reached the end of the commons and uncommons. So there's all kinds of a mess of stuff happening at Rare and Mythic here, but I wanted everyone, including me, to better familiarize themselves with the deck archetypes, the things going on, the cards you're going to see the most, so that you're familiar with what the basic building blocks are of this format. So, I'm not sure what the next video I'll make will be, but please stay tuned. Like, subscribe, you can hit the little notification bell if you so dare, and until next time, stay cool.